Hey guys, so update 1.3.1 is out and the balance changes are coming through, and I want to do a quick video just talking about some of the changes and how I feel like it's going to affect the meta. I've talked this through with a guy called Blade, who's one of the top players on the server, and kind of discussed what we think is relevant and what we think is not relevant. Starting off, added a new speed level, faster. Essentially this is just to add more clarity to the speed of units, and so the fastest units in the game will be displayed as fastest, and I think then faster. But I really wish they just gave us a numerical value for the speed. I feel like that would just be much easier, and it would give us a proper scale to compare things with. I think just having slow, fast, faster, fastest is a bit, I don't know. I'm more of a data guy. I much prefer like strict datas, but yeah. That doesn't really mean much in terms of the overall meta. Balance changes, GDI, APC brings the APC damage levels higher than the Rhino, making it more useful as a tank, as it tanks enemy damage. Increased by 10, increased by 10, and the attack speed is also brought a little bit faster. I don't think this is going to make APCs viable. The problem with APCs is they really aren't that beefy for how slow they are. They're like a really slow unit, and although they do drop a missile squad out, a damage increase of 10, I don't know if it's going to be enough to make them super relevant. They don't clear out infantry that quickly, and if I'm completely honest, they're not that great against aircraft either. So I just think that APCs overall are just too slow to be good. I think you can definitely build a deck with them, and I think that they have their place, but they're expensive and they're slow, and that really makes them kind of just bad units. Makes drone swarms faster and stronger at the expense of health. Health decreased to 220, so that's a 64 health nerf, which is actually a pretty significant health nerf, but the speed has gone back up. Again, this is going to allow drones to do exactly what they did previously. I mean, drones were sort of the spamming unit that you use to contest points really quickly in certain deck archetypes, and I think this just means they will fall to things like laser and missile squads a bit better. I don't know how much it's going to change things like Pitbull, because I still think Pitbull is going to take out one drone at a time, and I believe attack bikes are still going to take out 3 drones regardless. But this will help your ability with things like rhinos and missile squads and laser squads to take out drones a bit more effectively across the board. So I like that. But I don't think it really changes the place in the meta that drones had. The damage increase is actually quite nice. It might mean that it's a good way to contest riflemen, militants, flamers, and shockwaves in the early game if you're running an air-heavy deck, but you wouldn't include it outside of the decks that you already include it in right now. Stealth detection removed on Strong Arm and Kane, which I'll go over. I'm guessing this is anticipation of adding more stealth units into the future. It means that I mean, this is like very specific subset of scenarios, but it will allow you to get a stealth tank next to a Strong Arm turret or a Kane obelisk and fire an entire stealth tank barrage without being revealed before you get there, unless you cross a pad or go in range of infantry. Mammoth tank. Cost decreased to 230, so 20 decrease, about 12-13% Tiberium decrease. Turret speed turn twice as fast. It's still super slow. The problem is that its movement speed is just so slow, so it makes running over infantry actually really hard. And actually getting it to a point once you've built it, it takes forever. That's the problem. Slow units in general are just bad because of how quickly you need to react in a lot of scenarios. So anything that's just like really slow, unless you're getting it out in the mid game, like the Predator tank, is like a late game slow unit is just bad, like really bad. So I don't think Mammoth tank are going to be any more viable. MG squad turn speed increased by a significant amount. I never really felt turn speed was a massive issue. I think the MG squads are still going to be weak to what they were weak to previously, which is catching them before they set up, and also very weak to air units. So this isn't going to make MG squads OP. You're just going to feel a little bit of a quality of life improvement if you're running those MG squad decks that I see flying around, like the GDI Air MG squad deck, the No Harvester MG squad deck. It might make them a little bit more useful. The Orca was having difficulty dealing with Nod attack units like... I set an alarm. Like attack bikes. It was very capable of against pitbulls. This equalizes Orca's effectiveness in both factions. This is really a quality of life change for Orca, and it is specifically for attack bikes, and also will help it with things like War Dog squads as well, because it's now 4 missiles at 510 damage apiece. It's going to deal the same damage across 4 missiles than it did across 2 missiles, but it means that you're going to be able to more effectively kill attack bike squads because you'll one-shot them now. You'll also one-shot war dogs and any other squad-based vehicle units. But this is more of a quality of life change for the Orca against things like the attack bike squads, which means that you've got now one matchup that it's got better in, but it hasn't really changed the matchups across the board, and therefore you might see the Orca a little bit more, but it doesn't. I don't think it changes the place that you use the Orca in more than it already was. But I do think it's a good enough quality of life change to say, wait a second, I could now feasibly run this to counter Giga Cannon decks, for instance, and I don't have to worry about getting spammed with attack bikes. Predator tank, health decreased by a very small amount, about 3%, and it will affect certain matchups with training levels. Okay, so basically, I'm assuming if you are level 10 Predator tank versus level 10 Predator tank with 3 training levels, the level 10 Predator tank with 3 training levels won by a very small amount. So I'm guessing that's just the change there. Shockwave squads, health decreased to 400, damage increased to 150. So I don't think this is going to mean that like a double, I don't think this is going to mean that you can suddenly get riflemen contesting with shockwave squads. But it will mean that things like rhinos, for instance, will be able to clear out shockwave squads, and buggies will be able to clear out shockwave squads, and venoms will clear them out a little bit more easy, a little bit more readily. And it also means that if you were using them as blocking, like a lot of people like to play Giga Cannon or MLRS decks, and they used shockwaves and flame troopers as kind of like the blocking units because they were so beefy. That's not going to work as effectively anymore because their health has been significantly decreased and they will be cleared out much more readily. So I still think shockwaves are going to be good. I mean, they are just the barracks unit that counters every other barracks unit, and therefore they are going to retain that kind of usability across the board. But I do think that this will help some of the toxic nature of the way shockwave squads and flame squads were so easily able to block points and sort of block MLRS and Giga Cannons and 2-range units and so on and so forth. And if you're running things like buggies and venoms and rhinos and even talons, you're going to be able to clear these guys out more effectively. War Dogs makes extra chit damage matter more when dealing with War Dogs, since members will be barely surviving attack from missile squads or laser troopers. Essentially, the health has been decreased by 25% overall, and the speed of the unit has been decreased. This is kind of gutting War Dogs. War Dogs have been gutted pretty heavily here. I don't know how usable they're going to be from this point forwards. It means that almost every anti-vehicle unit has got better against these guys across the board, including attack bikes. And I think this is significant enough nerf. They could have offset this by increasing the damage of them just a little bit, and I would have said fair enough, but they've kind of gutted War Dogs pretty heavily. Wolverine damage is now more aligned to its specialties, basically nerfed the Wolverine. I don't think that makes that much difference. The only matchup that I think this is going to have an impact in is maybe the Wolverine versus attack bikes, where the Wolverine could actually feasibly do quite well against attack bikes because it had a significantly it had a decent DPS in that particular instance. Zone Troopers, the decreased structure damage was a band-aid, blah, 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 blah. Basically, now increased structure damage of Zone Troopers. You can now potentially rush bases with Zone Troopers, you can kill obelisks, you can kill strong-arm turrets, and strong-arm turrets aren't going to hard counter Zone Troopers anymore. A quality of life buff that has some specific uses, but Zone Troopers probably aren't, unless we find a way to make a Zone Trooper base rush deck work, probably you're going to see Zone Troopers in the same place they were before. Avatar, increase of 10. I'm going to still run the Avatar. It's still just a good unit, and for the sake of 10 Tiberium, I really don't care. Like, that is not a big enough nerf to the Avatar to make me say I don't want to run that thing anymore. No idea why they nerfed the Basilisk. It was like borderline viable originally, and now it's just even more so. To be completely honest, though, this is what I would have liked to have seen done to the Kodiak. I'm not quite sure why they felt the need to do it to the Basilisk, which was already a fringe nod tech unit. Confessors, damage to vehicles decreased to 15, a little bit like the Wolverine. Damage to infantry and aircraft increased, and the cost decreased. So actually, Confessors are getting a bit more specialized, and what I did complain about with Confessors is that their damage to aircraft was really kind of poor. And I like this change, as well as the fact that cost going down to 100 makes them a fairly cheap option coming from the Tech Lab and the Confessor Cyborg combo, as Cyborg's also got the same treatment as the Zone Troopers with their structure damage increase. That could be a feasible deck. I mean, if you push up with Cyborgs and Confessors and you get a Cyborg next to the enemy base, there is a very real possibility we could have Cyborg Confessor base rush strategies coming on. Very hard to actually make work in practice, but I think that might be some solid enough changes to potentially see this Nod Tech combo doing the rounds a little bit. Flame Troopers got the Shockwave Trooper treatment, so anything that I said for the Shockwave Troopers is the same for Flame Troopers. Like I said, Kane's Obelisk of Light. Inferno, health increased by 70, and damage to vehicles increased to 2040. I think this is specifically because if you had a Pitbull that was one level above, or it was sort of like one level and three training levels above, it wouldn't one-shot the Pitbull and it was left with a sliver of HP. This means that the Inferno should be able to one-shot the Pitbull in most scenarios. So actually it's a buff to the Inferno, which I actually don't think I like. I actually don't like the buff to the Inferno because it was already a really good unit. I don't mind the damage increase because the Inferno generally tends to one-shot most things. And this, obviously, 40 damage was specifically for that Pitbull interaction. But I don't think you need to buff the Inferno any more than that. It's already a great unit. Phantom, damage increase. So damage increased to 720. EMP duration decreased, so you won't get EMP across the entire time that the Phantom is reloading, and the health is decreased. Basically means the Hammerhead should be able to deal with it more effectively, although the Phantom is still going to be the premier anti-air unit in the game just because of how powerful that EMP is. Rockworms pop up, damage cooldown reduced to 6 seconds. That'll mean you can burrow and then unburrow, burrow and unburrow, burrow, then unburrow quite consistently if you want to. And with the splash damages, Rockworms might be fairly viable. Not super viable, but fairly viable. Health change decreased. So, ooh, a 75%, 75 health decrease to the Scorpion tank. That's actually going to make the matchup with the Predator tank much more aggravating now. And it also, I guess it also means that level differences in Scorpions, I think now across the board, I think across the board it's not going to make too much of a difference. But the Predator tank matchup might now be a little bit harder to win out. You're definitely going to need to be a bit more juggling with your Scorpions if you're trying to take on a Predator tank. And also means it's generally going to be a bit more weak to the Orca. Is going to be a bit weaker to Missile Troopers and Laser Troopers. It's just it's a nerf to the Scorpion tank that, yeah, not totally sure I needed it, but yeah. It's definitely going to make the Scorpion tank a bit less beefy. Cost decreased to 80 in line with the Wolverine, and damage to vehicles decreased. So actually, yeah, I think this just basically is trying to align the Widowmaker with exactly what the Wolverine is. So in terms of meta changes, how do I'll have a quick look at the Tiberium League map pool. I'll do a separate video on these. And fixed an issue where the Giga Cannon did not attack enemy units. Fixed an issue where the Rock Human continued to attack units outside of its range, which is something that we saw a little bit. Some people posted some clips of that. The lower league's level cap was not applied when facing an opponent in a higher league. Okay, good. Fixed an issue where the EVA and Cabal Force lanes didn't match the faction. Fixed an issue where players were unable to target specific locations on the enemy base, and fixed various issues that caused the game to crash. I wonder if they fixed some of the map bugs where, for instance, there was like a tree in the middle of the map. I wonder if they fixed that, but I don't know. It doesn't say it. In terms of meta, what do I think is actually going to change here? Well, the biggest changes are War Dogs. So there is an absolute huge plethora of decks that run War Dogs as an OPA, and that is going to make this much, much harder to pull off now. I think they really hit War Dogs pretty hard. You might see a little bit more Orca because it's now not going to struggle versus attack bikes, and with attack bikes being one of the most common nod units in the game, this makes the Orca a bit more viable because that really was one of its major weaknesses. I think then the only other meta changes that I see is that Shockwave squads and Flamer squads, they're going to be used. They're absolutely still going to be used. But you're probably going to see people tech into countering them much more quickly than they did before, and it means it's not going to be so punishing to say, let's say you see a Flamer squad stacked up with another Flamer squad, and you've only got one Shockwave or one Flamer squad in the field. If you want to go straight into a Venom, it's going to give you a much more immediate impact on the map. So I think that's the only changes. You can try and counter Shockwaves and Flamers a bit earlier now without having to go into one of those weird concave 2 versus 1 Flamer and and Shockwave Wars. Right, that is everything, and I hope you kind of enjoy the new changes. I don't think there's going to be too many major meta shifts, although I think the War Dog change is the biggest one on the update notes, and it's definitely going to impact the MLRS deck. I envision you might see people starting to run Militants, but I think just because of the fact that the War Factory is so important to the MLRS deck, people will likely still run War Dogs. They're just not going to be so good at becoming that frontline unit, and also contesting points obnoxiously because they are a lot slower, can't get them into position as quickly, and they're also not going to survive as long. So yeah, you've got to be careful with the War Dogs. Right, see you soon.